She left a sticky note with her password on it. That one careless mistake was the beginning of the end. Not just for my marriage, but for a man I hadn't even met yet. A man who thought he'd gotten away with it. He hadn't. My name's Kevin. Back in the early 2000s, I had what I thought was a normal life. Married to my wife, Michelle, for almost a decade. 2 kids, Ethan, 6, and Lily, 4. A house, 2 cars, the whole picture. The kind of life you build slowly, brick by brick, and never imagine watching someone else knock down. It started small. The kind of small you almost don't notice, because you don't want to. Michelle began mentioning, more and more, that she was dropping the kids off at her parents' place during the day. Now, on its own, that's nothing unusual. Grandparents love time with their grandkids. Except her parents lived 90 minutes away. Round trip, that's 3 hours of driving. And she wasn't doing it once a week. She was doing it 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Basically every day she wasn't at her part-time job. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, watching her load the kids into the car for the 3rd time that week, and feeling this strange, low hum of unease in my chest. Nothing I could point to, just a feeling that the story didn't add up. So I asked her about it directly, casually at first. "Hey, you've been going to your parents a lot lately." She brushed it off, said her mom just really wanted to see the kids. I let it go, but the feeling didn't. A few weeks later, I asked again, less casually this time, and she got defensive, too defensive for a question about visiting grandma. Michelle was never a good liar. Her voice would climb half an octave, and she'd suddenly find something very interesting to do with her hands. I'd seen that reaction before, over small things, never over something like this. Watching her do it now, over something that mattered, my stomach dropped. I didn't confront her again. Instead, I did something quieter. I started writing down the mileage on her car every single week. Here's the thing about a 90-minute round trip a few times a week. The math is simple, and it doesn't lie. Over the following month, her car was racking up roughly 400 extra miles a week that had no explanation. 400 miles is a lot of just visiting my parents. I sat with that number for a few days. Just sat with it. There's a specific kind of numbness that creeps in when you're staring at proof of something you already knew, but hadn't let yourself believe. My hands would go cold. I'd catch myself standing in front of the fridge, door open, not remembering why I'd walked over. Then came the sticky note. I sat down at our home computer one afternoon, and there it was, a small yellow square stuck to the edge of the monitor with her AOL password written in her own handwriting. She'd left it there 100 times before. I'd never once thought to use it. This time I did. I logged into her email and started scrolling. Most of it was nothing, forwards, coupons, messages from her sister. And then I found the thread. An exchange between Michelle and her college best friend, casual, almost gossipy in tone, where she talked openly about seeing an ex-boyfriend from high school regularly. She even made a comment mocking his wife for letting herself go after having kids. I read that line 3 or 4 times. Something about the cruelty of it. Laughing about another woman's body while sleeping with her husband. Made my jaw tighten in a way I can still feel now, just describing it. I printed the emails. My hands were steady doing it, which surprised me. I think by that point I'd moved past the shaking stage and into something colder. I didn't say a word to Michelle. Not yet. I needed the full picture before I did anything. I called a buddy of mine who was a cop, and he gave me the number of a guy who'd left the force a few years back to become a private investigator, a man named Ron. Ex-cop, methodical, no nonsense. I met him at a diner, slid the printed emails across the table along with what little else I knew, and asked him to find out everything. Ron didn't waste time. Within 2 weeks, he came back with a full report, photos, dates, times, locations. Michelle would drop the kids at her parents', then meet a man at a restaurant for lunch. Then the 2 of them would drive to a rundown motel on the edge of town for a few hours before she'd loop back, collect the kids, and come home like nothing had happened. I remember sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, flipping through those photos one by one. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over you in a moment like that. Not rage, not yet, just this heavy, sinking clarity. The life I thought I had simply wasn't the life I actually had. That was the moment something in me shifted. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg her to explain. I was going to handle this the way you handle anything that's already broken beyond repair, carefully and completely. I called a divorce lawyer the next morning. My parents had cheated on each other when I was a kid, and the fallout from that had wrecked my childhood and my siblings right along with it. I'd promised myself, long before I ever got married, that I would never let my own children grow up in that kind of chaos. Watching Michelle do exactly what my father had done, it didn't just hurt. It felt like watching history repeat itself in the worst possible way. So before I did anything else, I asked Ron for one more favor. Find out everything he could about the man in the photos. It didn't take him long. His name was Bob. Married. 3 kids of his own. And here's the detail that made the whole thing click into place. Bob worked as VP of sales at a company owned by his father-in-law. I sat with that piece of information for a long moment. Bob wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was doing it while his entire livelihood, his job, his house, likely even his lifestyle, depended entirely on his father-in-law's goodwill. I had my lawyer finalize the divorce papers, and I asked Ron for 2 extra copies of his full report, along with one more thing. I want to be clear about something. I never touched Michelle's custody rights over pettiness, and I never used the affair as a weapon in the actual divorce proceedings. That wasn't the point. The point was making sure the people who deserved to know the truth knew it. I picked a day carefully. The same day I had Michelle served with divorce papers at her workplace, I had Ron do something else entirely, somewhere across town. Ron met with Bob's wife, I'll call her Sarah, in person. He sat her down and showed her everything. The photos, the dates, the motel receipts. Sarah, from what Ron told me afterward, sat in stunned silence for a long time before she started shaking. She was polite, composed even, through most of the meeting. But there was a moment, Ron said, where her expression just cracked. That was the moment it stopped being an accusation and became a fact she couldn't unsee. What she chose to do with that information was entirely up to her. I didn't ask for anything beyond the truth being told, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't know, deep down, that a truth like that, delivered to the right person, at the right time, has a way of setting off consequences all on its own. And it did, within days. According to court documents that became part of the public record later on, Sarah cleaned out their joint bank account. She packed up the kids and left. When her father, Bob's boss, and the man who owned the company Bob worked for, found out what his son-in-law had been doing behind his daughter's back, Bob was fired before the week was out. It got worse for him from there. The house Bob and Sarah lived in was owned by her parents, so he was evicted not long after. Their divorce turned ugly fast. Court filings full of accusations, restraining orders, one incident where Bob showed up at the house to argue with Sarah, and it escalated so badly that her brother stepped in to protect her, breaking Bob's nose in the process. Police were called more than once. There were criminal charges. There was jail time. The man who'd spent his afternoons in a motel room, secure in the assumption that no one would ever find out, watched every single piece of his life, his marriage, his children, his career, his home, even his freedom, collapse in the span of a few months. I never met Bob. I never wanted to. I just made sure the truth reached the one person who had every right to know it. As for me, Michelle and I got through the divorce about as civilly as 2 people in that situation can. I never brought up the affair again after the papers were signed. I didn't need to. Our conversations, once the dust settled, stayed strictly about the kids. Now that Ethan and Lily are both grown, I don't really talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her. I just don't have a reason to. Last I heard, Bob had left the state entirely. He's not on the internet anywhere I can find. Sarah, on the other hand, went to work for her father's company and eventually took it over when he retired. I've thought about it a lot over the years, whether what I did was fair, and I keep landing in the same place. I never lied to anyone. I never manufactured anything. I just made sure the truth found the people it belonged to. What happened after that wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was just consequences, finally catching up. If this story hit you, smash that like button and drop a comment. Have you ever seen someone's own actions come back around on them like this? And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe, because there are plenty more where this came from.